Hi, good afternoon. This is Paul Rook, and welcome to our latest webinar, which we're doing with colleagues from Fairtrade. And apologies as ever, we had one or two technical difficulties at the start, but hopefully we've got through those now. So what we're wanting to sort of talk about today, and we recognise that there's been a lot happening in the last 3 years. We've obviously gone through COVID. We know what's happening in Ukraine, and we've now got a cost of living crisis, which is impacting certainly in the UK, but much broader than that as well. But we also need to keep very much in the front of mind as a coffee industry, the longer term and the climate related challenges, which we're well aware of, and we had before COVID. I think they went away a little bit, but certainly back with us now. Some of those are long term, but some are perhaps more short to medium term. And I think coffee is really about delivering an experience to the consumer. And continuing to do that relies on being able to access, in my view, as wide a range of coffees as that we currently enjoy from probably all of the 60 producing countries that we draw from. So anything that reduces that choice into the future is a problem. A challenge, but perhaps also an opportunity. And clearly, climate change as a subject, and a very big subject and a wide-ranging subject, has the ability to do that in a range of different ways. So the question is, how do we navigate through those challenges, and how do we introduce greater resilience into the supply chains? And that's what we're looking to cover in the next hour, but probably with more of a practical overview. We've heard an awful lot about theory, but we want to just delve a little bit more into the practicalities. So how do we navigate, and what do we mean by greater resilience? And to help us through that subject, we have a couple of speakers who I'll sort of introduce now. But the first one is Paulo Ferreira, who is a specialty coffee manager for the Latin American and Caribbean network of Fairtrade small producers and workers, which is CLAC. Paulo is in charge of developing, implementing and updating the commercial coffee strategy at a global level. Now, formerly a coffee producer, he now works closely with producers to improve their productivity, quality and ultimately their livelihood. So welcome to Paulo. We'll hear from Paulo in just a couple of minutes, but I'll also introduce our second speaker, Katie Burgess, is Head of Responsible Business and Partnership Teams at the Fairtrade Foundation. And for those that don't know, the Foundation is the independent non-profit organisation that licenses the use of the Fairtrade mark on products in the UK, but in accordance with the internationally agreed Fairtrade standards. Now, Katie's got over 15 years of experience working in sustainability and corporate social responsibility, focusing on making the coffee supply chains sustainable. And so her experience is particularly in creating strategies and action plans for brands and multinational companies to help meet the sustainability goals, and also create lasting impact for farmers and workers. And this is all about delivering sustainable supply chains for us all. And what we're going to do, I think we've developed through the previous BCA webinars more of a conversational approach. So that's how I sort of want to tackle today. So we're going to pose sort of different questions to both speakers, but at the same time we're very keen to get questions from you all as well as attendees. So if you can pop those questions into the chat as you sort of think of them, we'll pick some of them up if they sort of link into the conversation. We'll pick them up there and then. Otherwise, we'll pick them up at towards the end of the conversation with our two speakers. But if I can first, I guess, turn to Paulo, and really it'd be interesting, I think, Paulo, if you could just take 2 or 3 minutes, or maybe a little longer, just to give us some history of your journey through coffee, from being a producer through to the work you're now doing with Fairtrade. And I guess what also drives you in your current role.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you everyone for the opportunity to be here today. It's always amazing to be sharing the history from the producers to the market. I am from Brazil. I live in the main coffee region in Brazil, in South Minas, and I am son of producer. the third generation coffee production in Brazil. So I start my history in coffee, working with my father, working with my family at the farm as a coffee producer. And then when I start to see that the coffee was not so good at that time for us, I start to see how we could improve the farm, how we could improve the production and keep producing coffee, because in our region we are in a mountain region, so it's hard to move to other crop. So I decided to start to study. So I got a degree at college about coffee technology, that we have this career here in Brazil. So during these studies, I could see and I could met the Fairtrade certification, a Fairtrade cooperative that exists here in our city. So I had my first contact with the certification. So I decided to move on this new way to work and to start to work with Fairtrade coffee and also organic and specialty coffee in my farm. And after I got the degree, the cooperative had a vacancy, and I could join the cooperative as commercial, in the commercial department, trading coffee. So I worked there for 7 years as coffee commercial manager. So trading the coffee from the producers, buying coffee from the producers and selling it abroad. All fair trade and fair trade organic coffee, and also some high specialty coffees. And then after these 7 years working with this cooperative, I decided to move on, and I could see that CLAC has this hole to be done, this vacancy. So I decided to join to spread my example and the good examples that I could see in Brazil in the cooperative all over Latin America. And then I decided to move to work in CLAC as commercial manager. So right now my role is to support all the cooperatives, all the fair trade cooperatives in Latin America, to connect with the market and bring them information from the market and also from the cooperatives to the buyers, to the clients, to the consumers. We work really near with Fairtrade Foundation and other national fair trade organizations that we work with, and helping the cooperatives and the buyers to build, let's say, to build the bridge. So that's my key role today in CLAC.
Thanks for that, Paolo. And I guess just going back to sort of, the title and my introduction, thinking about some of the challenges, the climate-related challenges. I mean, how do you see those for producers on a daily basis? And I mean, have you seen those challenges sort of evolve or change in the sort of the last year or two? And even are you expecting to see more evolution, as we look sort of forward as well?
Yeah, the climate change right now is the biggest challenge for the producers in all the countries, and we have seen a lot of change in the last years, in the last 10 years at least. It has getting faster. I can see this. We have examples like droughts in many regions, like rains when we were not expecting it, or too much rain in a short period of time and no rain in others. So it's too much uncertain about how the weather will be in the year. So it's affecting the productivity, it's affecting the quality, and we are seeing many producers seeing their crop dropping a lot because that, and having uncertainty how they can manage many things, because in the past the producers knew, for example, in Brazil, from November to February we are gonna have a lot of rain, so we may fertilize the coffee, we may do all the work that need water. But right now we cannot predict, we cannot forecast it as well. The producers can't see. So for example, they fertilize, but the rain didn't come, so they lost their investment, their work, and their products. And also after some time it rains a lot that they can do nothing. For example, right now here in Brazil this week it's raining a lot, so the producers can't work because it's too much rain. We are having some flood, something like that. And of course, sometimes we have like hailstorms that damage the crops. For example, in Central America also we had a lot of rain during this beginning of new season that get the crop delayed, so the quality is damaged, the productivity also is damaged. So it also bring other problems when you got the crop delayed because too much rain in the beginning of it. Right now you have too much crop to crop at the same time, so you lack workers to do that. So you lack structure of post-harvest structure to process all the crops. So it's not only about the productivity, but also other problems that came together with this problem of the climate change. So that's the big challenge. And from the last 10 years, we can see it getting worse every year and more uncertainty every year.
Thanks. Yeah, and I guess we may just come back to this a little later on, but on top of that, some of the things that we're talking about in terms of legislative pressures, which are going to be sort of pushed back at to sort of producing countries, where they talk about due diligence, where we talk about deforestation. I guess we have to sort of look at how they factor in as well. But I guess all of what you've talked about sort of brings us and bring Katie in here so to talk about the other element, I guess, of our title, which is when we see how producers are being impacted there, how can we sort of help? How can we sort of, I guess, introduce sort of resilience and build the sort of an understanding of resilience, and essentially what does that mean when you get onto the ground? So, Katie, I mean, how do you sort of see that, and taking into account what sort of Paolo has just said, where do you see you and your team sort of being able to sort of help at practical levels as we go forward?
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is that the producers and the cooperatives know the situation far better than we do sitting here in the market. It's the producers and the cooperatives who are dealing with the effects of climate change. There's no robust science yet to say what exactly the permutations will be year on year, and as Paolo referred to, the reality of climate change is that everything's in flux. So I think it's really important that we remember that it's the producers and the cooperatives who are on the front line, and they are the ones that are experiencing this. So really, the work that we do at Fairtrade relies so heavily on the work that Clack and Paolo and his team do in terms of gathering that intelligence, is what is happening on the ground, and then how can Fairtrade best support those producers in developing resilient plans. What we don't want to be doing is sitting in the market and saying, this is what we think sustainable agriculture should look like in Brazil or Colombia or Peru. Actually, we need to be hearing from the producers, what are they seeing, and what makes sense in their ecosystem, what makes sense in their context to be able to either mitigate or adapt to these effects of climate change. What we don't want to be doing as Fairtrade is setting resilient plans which aren't right for the market context. So what we do a lot is that's why we have the team, Paolo and his team in the CLAC, to be able to feed that information back to the market so that we have real producer knowledge of what is happening, and then how best companies and Fairtrade can support those producers. And it is about supporting, it's about cultivating knowledge at the cooperative level so that the cooperatives can help themselves. That's the model of Fairtrade. This is about fair trade. It's not about aid going to cooperatives. It's about them building their resilience, and how can we best be a support for them. The best way to be a support for them at the moment is to be increasing the volumes that they're buying on Fairtrade terms, to be quite honest, because they get a Fairtrade premium. That premium is essential to them, the cooperatives, being able to develop their own resilient plans. We have, obviously, there are elements within the Fairtrade standards which are about climate change, they're about resilience, adaptation, mitigation, but the bulk of the work really comes from the cooperative assessing what their context is, and then using Fairtrade Premium and development plans to be able to create their own resilient plans. Like the context varies so wildly. I'm sure Paolo will be able to tell you that what's happening in one part of Peru isn't the same as what's happening in another part of Peru. So it's really about listening, gathering intelligence, and then seeing the best way that we can be supportive without enforcing more and more burden being put on the producers. I think that's the a fear that we have. And Paul, you just mentioned about legislation. Legislation is likely to be passed down to the producing countries and the origin countries, and that's something that we really need to consider, and how we can best support farmers and cooperatives rather than enforcing more and more rules and regulations on them, when we know that already there are many producers which are really struggling, despite the price of coffee skyrocketing and being in so much flux at the moment. Still, there is no long-term stability in that price, and we need to ensure that not too much of the burden that producers aren't being faced with having to adapt and mitigate to climate change without the market support being there for them.
Harry, did you want to sort of make any additional sort of comments on what Katie's just said?
Yeah, I totally agree with Kate about, for example, as she said, each country, each cooperative, each community many times has its particularity. So its situation, its reality that's really different many times among the cooperatives. So it's something that we try to do, and we are doing, I think, really well, is build this knowledge. And as I said, build this bridge among consumers and producers, organizations and producers, to build this knowledge in both sides, in consumer side and also in the producer side, so they can think how can they take actions to mitigate or to get these problems lower than it should be. So how they can keep producing coffee. So we always try to build this knowledge, to have like ambassadors, have people that are examples, to spread these among all the producers and the producers organizations, doing a lot of exchange among countries, among cooperatives, and many times among consumers, buyers, and producers organizations. That this helps to change the mindset of the producers, and they don't think about it's impossible to produce coffee right now because the climate change, the coffee in the future will not exist anymore. And they start to think of how I can keep producing coffee in a better way. What I can do to keep my farm, to keep my business, because their farm is their business with a lot of risks, and how I can mitigate and get these risks lower and keep producing coffee in a better way, in a sustainable way, and environmental and economical way to my family survive and develop. So when we start build these bridges and exchange this knowledge, build this knowledge, we can see a lot of development in this way about to keep producing coffee in the future. And I can see a lot of, for example, comparing fair trade cooperatives with producers that are still not in the fair trade cooperative. The impact of the premium, the impact of the minimum price is really good for the producer. So they can many times invest in new practices and do some tests, because many times they don't know if it will work well. So they need to test. So it helps them to do this research in field, taking the risk and doing it really well, and take what is wrong, what is getting right, and replicating this to other producers. And we are also seeing some other producers, for example, neighbor producers that are not fair trade members, but they are also starting to see the results that the fair trade producers are having in building this resilience. And they also are starting to do some things to be resilient in some way. So are some impacts that we are seeing, and some actions, many actions that the cooperatives, fair trade cooperatives and fair trade producers are taking to build this knowledge, to develop new practices, to keep working coffee, to keep producing coffee in the future.
Thanks. I mean, we may just come back to that if time allows later on, but I mean, Paolo, you've talked about sort of, you know, the importance of keeping producers on the land and keeping producing. And I guess from a consumer point of view, you know, at the end of the day, that's equally important because, you know, if we lose any origin, essentially we're reducing the sort of the choice and availability that's to consumers. But Katie, I mean, if we think specifically about the consumer, how do we determine their sort of expectations, and maybe how do we also manage their expectations on sort of the challenges? And I mean, you know, we've been through COVID, we've got the cost of living sort of issues, challenges at the moment. I guess, you know, they're potentially impacting those consumer expectations. And those expectations may also vary, I guess, depending on the size of business that consumers are thinking about. But I mean, you know, we've talked about sort of the producer, but yeah, how do we sort of, I wouldn't say manage the expectation of consumers, but you know, what role do we all have to, I guess, and educate may also not be the right word, but inform the consumer and ensure the consumer's got that better picture and understanding of, you know, some of the challenges which, you know, maybe most of us are just not thinking about on a day-to-day basis with a product that's, you know, is omnipresent. It's always there. Therefore, we haven't really had to worry about, well, you know, the situation when it might not be there.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately the situation that it might not be there is a very real reality. That in the next 20 years, I think the statistic is 50% of the world's coffee growing region will be unsuitable to grow coffee. So it's a very real story, and it's a very real reality that we need to be telling consumers. I think it's really interesting. We saw from Fairtrade perspective during COVID that actually the purchase intent for Fairtrade increased. And we did some research into this to find out what was behind that, what was behind that driver. And it was actually that the pandemic seemed to narrow people's fields of vision to understand that actually where their commodities were coming from were even more important, and that connection to producers was even stronger. And I think that was built out of the fact that we were all going through a very similar situation. So it was interesting to see that the purchase intent for Fairtrade has increased over that time and continues to increase now. And I think we think about consumers as kind of one group, and they're not really one group. You have several subsets of consumers, those who are really engaged and who want to find out more, and who we can be really trying to educate and ensure that they're being advocates for sustainable purchasing. And then you have another subset of the market who kind of assume and expect companies and companies across the board really to be doing the right thing. And then we have a third subset, which are those who don't really believe that companies are doing the right thing. And so we can't really maybe consider consumers as one total group. And we can be talking to those three subsets in a slightly different way. So as I said, those who are really engaged, let's make sure that they have all of the information that they need to be going out to their friends, their networks, you know, that really those are the people that will be shouting about what are the challenges, how can we kind of show consumer power. And then that middle group, who are the ones who are expecting companies to be doing the right thing, we need to be telling them a slightly different message. And then obviously for those who ardently don't believe in business for good, we need to be trying to show them that actually when businesses are doing the right thing, it can make a real difference, especially in the situation of climate change. So there's definitely a varying degree of what consumers expect from companies, and there's a varying degree of how much consumers are trusting companies and trusting them to be doing the right thing. So I think you can't, we sometimes fall into the trap of assuming that all consumers want all of the information, and some consumers don't. Some consumers just there's a lot of messages right now. There's a lot to be bombarded with, as you mentioned, the cost of living, crisis is really at the forefront of people's minds. So how can we be showing that actually if the cost of living crisis is impacting us, it's impacting producers tenfold. And so the decisions that we as consumers and shoppers are making every day in the UK are just exacerbated in producing origin countries, and making sure that we're demonstrating that it's not about right now, it's not about a choice for now, it's about a choice for the future. And if we continue to go down this path of shopping and living and consuming more sustainably, it's going to elongate and have longevity for supply chains. Whereas if we carry on consuming irresponsibly, we need to face the facts that a lot of the things that we come to rely on now won't be there in years to come.
Yeah, thank you. Just a reminder to everybody. Obviously, I'm asking a number of questions. I'd love to ask questions that the audience want to raise as well. So please do pop those into the question box if you have them. Paolo, just coming back to you a moment, and just sort of trying to broaden out a little bit. I mean, one of the things that I've sort of seen talked about, and indeed we've talked about in a number of sort of different fora over the last sort of year or so, is what other opportunities exist for sort of producers to earn income without moving out of coffee. So what other revenue streams may be possible? And again, this is going to vary considerably from country to country, and and potentially from region to region within sort of countries. But I mean, what examples of sort of more novel streams, whether that's in terms of making more out of essentially the coffee product itself, and even making money out of sort of some of the waste streams, but also I guess looking at things like the potential for carbon capture. Are you seeing any of those across any of the producing regions sort of taking any hold, or likely to take hold in the next sort of year or two?
Yeah, I have seen a lot of producers organizations thinking about new approaches and how they can build this resilience and be more effective in the business, in the coffee production business. So something that many producers organizations are doing is trying to show the coffee farm as a business, as a company, as the producer's company, because many times the producers think they are only working, and that is not a business. And sometimes they think and get out of the coffee plantation to work for a supermarket, to work for a gas station, something like that, to work as an employee. So they don't realize that it is their own business. So we always try to work this mindset to them see the coffee as a business and start to think how diversify and mitigate the risk. So many times we are seeing producers are working with Fairtrade, with Fairtrade Organic, with high specialty coffees to have like a diversification of markets, of niche that they can access. Some producers also taking a next step in the coffee supply chain. So for example, in local markets, the coffee consumption is increasing sometimes. So we are seeing a lot of producers starting to roast their own coffee to sell in the local market. A lot of cooperatives doing this to sell in the local market. So to build, to spread the risk among the supply chain. And also with other products. So we have diversifications with other productions that we can do together the coffee, like some fruits, some vegetables, and things like that. And some actions that many producers are starting to think, and some are already doing right now, is the agroforestry plantation. So coffee under shadow with wood trees, with fruity trees, to bring more diversity to the coffee trees, and also take another source of income to the farm to help them to survive and to keep developing. And a lot of people are starting to do that. So with this, we are seeing also some cooperatives and some people start to think about carbon capture, and some of them including about carbon credits trade. So are something that we are seeing that producers are already looking at to develop and to see. So I think in the future we are gonna have a lot of development in this side. A lot of organizations among the countries we work with are doing projects and studies like this, and someone already has this implemented.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I was at a conference a couple of months ago where a sort of producer representative was talking about, you know, the potential for carbon capture and the amount of carbon that coffee producers could capture compared to the amount that the you know, production of the crop produced. And I think we were talking about a sort of 5-to-1 sort of ratio, which I suspect is not something that most commodity sectors would get sort of close to. So I think that the potential is great. And Katie, I'll come to you in a moment just to sort of see what else, you know, you're seeing and thinking may be possible. But I mean, Paolo, you talked about the sort of, you know, essentially sort of shade coffee, and I think, you know, we go back to some of the sort of the legislation, particularly we're talking about deforestation, and obviously we're a little more clear what the EU proposals are than the UK at the moment, but we're also seeing the US starting to talk about, you know, proposals for sort of deforestation. And I think from our association, from a BCA point of view, one of the things that we're keen to do, and we talked about consumers earlier, but you know, I think we're keen to have more of an involvement with legislators, with politicians, particularly in the UK, to get them to understand that, you know, not all commodities are the same, and that actually when we're talking about, you know, deforestation as an example, that coffee perhaps has many more opportunities to deliver sort of a carbon positive approach than some of the other commodities that are on that deforestation list. And you know, how do we ensure that the legislation is written in such a way that, yes, we're achieving the overall objectives, which I think everybody's quite clear about, but we're actually along the way ensuring that we're allowing all of the opportunities as well, the positive opportunities. And I think that's, you know, that's going to be one of the challenges for legislators, and where I think, you know, we certainly see ourselves playing more of a role from the UK perspective in getting that sort of better understood. I mean, Katie, coming back to you, you know, Paolo's talked about a number of sort of opportunities that are either, you know, being grabbed or potential for that. I mean, from where you sort of sit and see it, do you see how big an opportunity do you see, I guess, and are there other sort of opportunities that we haven't yet sort of realised that, you know, that may be credible alternatives in the next sort of few years?
Yeah, definitely carbon capture is one that we're seeing the market being more and more interested in. And we're mainly looking in our large scale projects at adaptation rather than the mitigation of the effects of climate change. But definitely carbon capture is one, and shade growing and alternative sources of income. Not so much in Latin America, but we do a lot of projects in Africa on sustainable fuel for home usage. That's a really big drive amongst our African coffee producers to try and reduce their carbon emissions, and also to offer carbon credit projects. So there are fair trade carbon credits where companies can offset their carbon against their insetting on fair trade supply chains. And I think also we're seeing a lot of younger people in producing origins going through agroforestry training, and that really being shown within the cooperatives and the kind of innovative ideas that they're coming up with. I mean, I think shade growing and reforestation is a really interesting one. Not only does it provide shade for coffee trees, it can help prevent landslides, it can carbon capture. Like, there's a whole number of benefits that come with the ecosystem of cross cropping on farms. So I think that we'll definitely see that more, and I think we need to kind of cultivate what the market looks like for that. So how can we ensure that what producers are producing, that there's a market demand for, and that they're not just producing for the sake of capturing carbon, which helps the Western world with their carbon footprint. I think we need to be ensuring that that has economic value to the producers.
Thank you. I've got a question that's coming from the audience, which I'm going to just keep for a moment or two, because I sort of just want to sort of stay on the, I think, sort of closer to the theme we're on at the moment. The question to both of you: one of the phrases that I perhaps half expected to hear by now in the last sort of 25 minutes and haven't yet is the phrase of regenerative agriculture. And I'm conscious that you know, that there is no defined or absolute definition of that yet, and it potentially means slightly different things to different people. But I'd just be interested from both of you. I mean, you know, I think, Katie, you've just talked about one or two aspects which probably run very close to regenerative agriculture, could well be examples. But again, how do you see regenerative agriculture within sort of coffee? And I guess linking it not only to sort of the climate related issues, but from a producer point of view, I guess linking it ultimately to its impact on overall income levels as well. I don't know who wants to sort of take that first.
I think you can take that. The coffee expert, Paula, you can take that one.
Yeah, the regenerative agriculture right now is a really new concept. I have seen a lot of people talking about it, and in my conception, my point of view, the regenerative agriculture is a way where you build diversity, where you build biodiversity in the land. So, for example, talking about coffee, it's still hard to have a right concept about what is regenerative coffee culture. It's pretty new, but I believe, for example, if you have a plantation and the producer is working with agroforestry, bring trees to the coffee plantation, bring biodiversity to the coffee plantation, bring more life to the land. So we can say that's regenerative, because the producer is regenerating the life that was in the land, that was and we lost in the last year. So if you are building it again, building life in the soil, building life among the trees, you are doing a regenerative agriculture. And in coffee, of course, I think we have a lot of opportunities, as we have discussed here, to build this concept really well, because coffee, you may work like in a forestry and under the shadows with other cultures, and it responds really well, for example, to the biological system under the soil. If you enrich it, you get a really good response in terms of productivity, in terms of quality and health of the coffee tree. So it's a culture that you can work well on this concept and work really well. So in resume, for me, the regenerative agriculture is when you bring life to the field again, so in some way.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. I'm just going to go back to the question that we've had come in. I may have to just sort of summarize it a little bit, but it probably goes back to some of the points we were talking about slightly early on, and the suggestion is that one of the fundamental challenges appears to be around pricing, and I guess low pricing, but perhaps equally the volatility of pricing. And you know, we sort of seen that across lots of commodities, certainly in the last sort of few years, because it potentially, does it affect anything that farmers can do to adapt or mitigate against climate change? So the question is that they understand Fairtrade is working on living income reference prices for coffees, and for coffee. What influence this work might be having to date at the producer level, but also in terms of its engagement with businesses along the sort of the whole supply chain. Is that helping producers cover the costs of sustainable production, or persuading more people to enter into that sort of system? And is it is it also, and I think Katie, you touched on this sort of slightly earlier on to some degree, does it also help to shine a light on those actors who perhaps need to do more to ensure the sort of the value within the supply chain is working more effectively? So Katie, perhaps if you want to sort of lead on that, and then Paolo, if you want to come in on any aspects afterwards.
Yeah, we're working on living income reference prices across coffee origins at the moment. So we don't have a complete set of all coffee origins, but there are origins where we have already set a living income reference price. And I think a lot of it is the person that asked the question is absolutely right. Like the volatility and is really a problem, because not only even when you have high prices, it still is affecting producers when they don't have long-term contracts. So I think when we're considering living income reference prices, we also have to consider, the contracting process. So yes, the Fairtrade living income reference price will cover the cost of sustainable production. It also covers the cost of a decent living standard, and that can only have a fundamental change or a fundamental impact to producers' lives when they are guaranteed that price for a long period of time. I think we will start to see the impacts of that once producers are given kind of 3-5 year contracts and they are consistently selling at that level, and they're consistently selling enough volume on fair trade terms for that living income reference price to really make a difference. I think we struggle sometimes if there's a cooperative that's only selling 10% on fair trade terms, so they're receiving 10%. They're receiving, the living income reference price for 10% of their crop. We can't expect that to mean that only 10% of producers are going to be achieving a sustainable livelihood. We really have to see that this is the first step in a longer term journey of paying producers a fair and equitable price over a long period of time. So yes, it's fundamental that we get these living income reference prices and we start implementing them in the market, but really the impact is going to be seen over the next 3-5 years if producers are consistently selling and consistently able to achieve that living income reference price across a high percentage of their crop that they're selling. You just can't expect that to have an impact if a producer group is receiving different contracts year on year, then they're not sure, they're not stable in their supply chain, they don't know the consistent volumes that they're selling to the market. It's impossible then from a cooperative level for them to plan for the future, and it's impossible at an individual farmer level for them to be able to plan for the future. You know, what are they able to put away into savings? They just have no stability. What are they able to reinvest into their farm? They're not going to reinvest into their farm if they're not sure what they're going to be selling the next year. So living income reference prices are crucial, and we really need them to show the value of coffee to the market. We really need them to show to consumers, this is what it takes to grow coffee. This is what it costs to grow coffee, and for producers to have a decent livelihood. But that's just one part of the puzzle. The second part of the puzzle has to be long-term consistent sales to allow the producers to reinvest into their farm and to feel stable and able to continue coffee farming. This volatility will only add to producers not feeling like they're able to commit and to invest in their farms. I hope that answers the question. Yeah,
I think it does. And Paolo, before you answer, I'm going to be very unfair, and I'm going to throw in an additional question to you to sort of bring along, because and this is potentially controversial, but I want to bring it in anyway, and not taking away anything from what Katie's just said in terms of the sort of living income. My additional question to you is, do you also see innovation and productivity increases going hand in hand with this to both improve income overall, but also improve sustainability? So apologies, slightly unfair, but we'll see how you handle it.
Yeah, I think that talking about the price and living income price, it's I fully agree with Katie in all the points. So, and of course, the productivity and in the producer level, how we may help them to achieve it faster, it's really important. So how the thinking is we need to have a living income price for the producers. They need to develop, as Kate said, it was really happy because when they are uncertain, they are already uncertain about what they will produce in the next year because of the climate change. So they are uncertain about what will be the price, and many times uncertain about I will be able to sell this coffee. So it builds a lot of uncertainty. So they many times they cannot invest in the farm in the land to keep like a reserve to survive because they are not sure about how will be the future. So we have to build this knowledge and this conscience in the producers to see we work to achieve a living income to survive, to develop, but how I may support from my side also to achieve it faster. So many times it's not only selling the coffee at higher levels. So we need to develop the productivity, we need to develop the quality, we need many times to develop the other cultures to have a faster approach and a better approach to it. So we are working really hard in farm level with this conscious. We are already working increasing the productivity, increase the quality and diversification. So and build this conscious as a business, the coffee farm as a business, to then start to think strategically and to see when is the best time to sell and how to build the partnerships, the right partnerships to have this long-term commitment that Kate mentioned, and then they can make the investments they need and build the knowledge and build the strengths that they need to achieve the living income, let's say. So, and build it together with the consumer side, with the buyer side, because many times it's impossible to you to sell a coffee at $10 per pound would be great for the producers, but it's impossible to the consumers. So you need to build it together and find the right approach to everything. I don't know if I have replied well the answer.
Yeah, I think it's sorry, yes,
really
go ahead.
When talking about productivity, because I think there are lots of very noble efforts to increase productivity, but increasing productivity only helps if there's a buyer for that increased volume. So I think we have to be mindful that increasing production isn't always the solution. We have to be increasing productivity, yes, as long as there's a buyer to buy that coffee at a sustainable price. Otherwise, we're just going to have a oversupply and the price will crash. So I think it's a very fine balance between encouraging production increases versus improving productivity and buying that at a sustainable price.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it is a multifaceted approach, and I think, yeah, I mean, you're right. Looking forward, all of the sort of the indicators suggest that that the consumption increases is in most of the major consuming countries are forecast to sort of continue to rise, and of course we have a number of other countries as they move into middle income. We start to see them move into much more into sort of coffee. So I think that was sort of the driver behind it. I'm very conscious of time, so I think I'm going to close with one final question to both of you, and it comes back, I think, to a point Katie made earlier on that in terms of the timescales, and we must bear in mind that if we're looking at sort of 20, 30 years hence, that's not very many generations in terms of coffee plants. So with that in mind, looking forward to 2050. What's the vision that you both have for coffee production? And bearing in mind this sort of life cycle element, what's the one thing really that our audience needs to be taking away from today as a must do? Katie, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, we must be educating consumers. We must be educating consumers on what it takes to grow coffee and what it means to continue to have coffee in 20, 30 years. And I think we need to be educating those businesses who aren't yet on their sustainability journey, and we need to be showing the value of what a sustainable supply chain will mean for a business in the future, because the only way we're going to continue to be having coffee is if we all come together and create sustainable supply chains, which means that businesses can continue buying coffee and consumers can be continuing to drink coffee. So I think it's, from my perspective, the role that I have, it's a two-pronged approach, making sure consumers understand where their coffee is coming from, the value of that, and how much it takes to produce the coffee. And then also ensuring that those producers are holding businesses to account to make sure that they are employing sustainable buying practices. And then also for those companies as well to be understanding that sustainability isn't a nice thing to do now, it's essential for a business to continue in the future.
Paolo, over to you for your must-do takeaway.
Yeah, I think the way to keep producing coffee and looking for the future is, as Kate said, building this knowledge in the consumers, in the producers, building knowledge among the whole supply chain, and change the mindset to the people to see what are they paying for. When they are buying something, what are they paying for? So what's behind this product, this service, what I am financing. So when they start to think about it, they start to understand the supply chain, to understand the risk, sorry, to understand the real cost behind that and the impacts that will be have in the future. So build this knowledge, this conscious about what I'm buying. I am paying for something behind the supply chain. We'll build better supply chain. Sorry.
And that's fine, thank you.
Yeah.
I could agree with sort of both of you, and I think this point about education, is important, and from an association point of view, in a way, it's partly why we sort of have regular contacts and conversations with Fairtrade and others, because it's no one party has the answer to this, but we all have a vested interest in ensuring that the coffees that we have today are the coffees that we have in the sort of the future. And we're keen to sort of talk to as many different people as possible as to how we all help to sort of achieve that. I want to close now. We've got to think about a minute left. I want to close by on behalf of all of you thanking both Katie and Paolo for their sort of thoughts today. I hope you've sort of found it interesting, and I hope we've sort of dug a little sort of deeper into some of the sort of not only the issues, but how practically we can address them, and hopefully you've sort of got a bit of an indication as to the the workload that falls on both of our presenters in their sort of day jobs and the challenges that we've sort of got going forward. But also I think we've perhaps picked up one or two opportunities going forward as well, which give us cause for hope. It's we can tend to be a little sort of overly pessimistic at times, but I think there are good opportunities for sort of coffee, but we all need to work together to make sure that we've got the right information, we're getting the right information back from producers, the signals about what they sort of need to do, and a whole range of things, and then how we sort of adapt to those. And so finally, if people have any sort of thoughts on future webinars that we should be running, please let us know. We're looking at the program for 2023. For that apart, can I thank you all for your attendance today? It probably falls on me now, as it's getting into December, to wish you all a very merry festive season and a happy new year, and we look forward to seeing you all in 2023. So thank you very much for your attendance, and have an enjoyable rest of the day.